The general topic of this amendment, which I'll address while the pages are distributing the amendment to my colleagues, this amendment has to do with the issue of centralized assessment, which has come up in debate before. But I have some significant concerns about the movement towards centralized assessment. And we have certainly heard from a number of people in the profession of assessment, but we've also heard from a number of municipalities, and we've heard from I've heard from the counties that are in my constituency. I've heard from some of the towns, villages, and cities in my constituency that they're concerned that the move towards centralized assessment, while its goals are laudable in terms of creating some degree of standardization, that the movement in that direction will actually create a lot of problems in terms of service to local ratepayers. So now, Madam Chair, that you have the amendment, I'll read it into the record. I move that Bill 21, the Modernized Municipal Government Act, be amended in Section 25C in the proposed Section 292, sub 2.1a by striking out "and" at the end of Clause A, and by adding the following after Clause A. 8.1. The most recent municipal assessor's assessment of the designated industrial property, if available. And, Madam Chair, that this amendment is reflective of what stakeholders have told us that have come forth with concerns regarding the centralization of industrial assessment into municipal affairs. Now, the concerns are based on the premise that centralized assessment will decrease local autonomy and local knowledge of the properties being assessed. The local autonomy extends as well to local responsiveness to issues. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in a meeting along with my colleague, the member for Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville, with members of Minburn County Council. And they indicated to us why they're concerned about this. In their case, their assessments are done by a contracted assessor. They do not have an assessor on staff. But that contracted assessor provides the county with excellent service. And if there are appeals to an assessment or questions about an assessment, they have found that that contracted assessor can provide the ratepayer with a very prompt and a service that is something that comes forward, and they are very satisfied with the service that they receive from the assessor. And they are concerned that if that is centralized, if that service is pulled into the central government, they have lost control over it, and they have lost the ability to monitor, for the sake of the ratepayers, whether the assessment is, and any appeals or any questions about the assessment are being answered and dealt with in a clear and rapid manner. The other problem with centralized assessment is, or the reason I should say that many is often given with regards to centralized assessment, is because of inconsistencies within assessment from county to county, and that some would argue that for example, an installation, a specific industrial installation in one county that is largely similar to one in another county should be assessed exactly the same. Well, there are variations from county to county, and those variations have to be taken into account, but some of that variation, if it's excessive, could easily be brought closer together simply by applying assessment guidelines that are present within the current guide to assessment in the province of Alberta. This is not a reason, or this variability, which could easily be corrected by applying the assessment guidelines as they exist currently, is not a reason to remove local authority over assessment and centralize it into government. In my view, Madam Chair, this reflects a disturbing trend on behalf of this government, once again, to centralize a great deal of what goes on in government into a larger and larger centralized government bureaucracy, rather than allowing local councils that are accountable to their own ratepayers, to their own electors, to deal with these issues on the ground in the communities where they live. Certainly, I've heard consistently from many of the municipalities that I represent that they would prefer, and they would prefer to maintain the current system of either using an on-staff assessor or a contracted assessor, rather than having a centralized assessor over which they would have no influence and no control. And if there were problems with the service that was provided by that centralized assessor, they're not confident that those problems would be addressed or dealt with in a prompt manner. Currently, if they have any problems with the assessment services that they're receiving from either their contracted or staff assessor, they can deal with it in a short period of time. And so, Madam Chair, this particular amendment deals with that. It deals with the need to provide for municipal assessments that are consistent but in fact still have local control and local autonomy, and I would ask all members of the Assembly to support this amendment.
Thank you, Honourable Member.